You obviously were serving as vice president the last time President Trump was putting tariffs in place. He's gone much bigger and broader this time, and he seems to be downplaying any concerns that people have about a recession. Instead, he's arguing in the long run his policies will be successful. Do you worry, though, that the tariffs he's putting in place could potentially lead the U.S. into a recession?
Well, let me back up for a second and say that I really do believe that President Trump's historic re-election last year was in many respects not just a reflection of a personality, but it was also that what I heard all over the country is that people wanted to get back to the policies of our administration. In addition to strong American leadership on the world stage, which we can get into in a minute, it also was that we cut taxes, rolled back regulation, unleashed American energy. But we also used targeted tariffs, particularly against China, after decades of trade abuses and intellectual property theft. We brought China to the table and achieved that 2020 Phase 1 trade deal that was truly historic and was a beginning of changing the dynamic of our relationship with China. So now, as I see this administration, I do have concerns that with the president's call for broad-based tariffs against friend and foe alike, that ultimately the administration is advancing policies that are not targeted at countries that have been abusing our trade relationship, but rather are essentially new industrial policy that will result in inflation, that will harm consumers and ultimately harm the American economy. So, again, I want to be clear. When it comes to China, when it comes to decades of trade abuses, my view always is free trade with free nations, that we ought to be engaging our trading partners across the free world to lower trade barriers, lower non-tariff barriers and subsidies. But when it comes to authoritarian regimes, we ought to get tough, stay tough, and demand that they open their markets and respect our intellectual property.
He dubbed it Liberation Day, and you wrote in reference to that the only thing that Americans had been liberated from were trillions of dollars in investments. Do you think he understands the impact that it could be having on regular Americans?
I think he does. But
he's still doing it anyway, in your view?
President Trump and I had many long conversations about trade in our 4.5 years. I strongly supported our administration's policies on trade, including the get tough policies with Mexico and Canada that resulted in the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, the largest trade agreement in U.S. history. But we were well on our way. We'd renegotiated a trade agreement with South Korea. We were well on our way to a new trade agreement with Japan, with the UK, even the EU was in discussions. But it was all based on using his instinct that tariffs serve the American economy to bring our trading partners to the table, to open up markets. My concern now is I see the president following more of what I think has been his historic view, that at the end of the day, a certain minimum threshold of tariffs on all goods coming into the country will serve the American public and our economy. Some people believe that. I hold the view that trade means jobs, and that if we were to erect even the 10% minimum tariff that is on today, if that was all that remained after this, I think ultimately it would stifle American growth, limit prosperity, drive up costs for American consumers, and we ought to be driving again toward that principle of free trade with free nations and standing tough, standing firm on authoritarian regimes like China.
So you think he's wrong on tariffs?
I do think this version of tariff policy that's broad-based, indiscriminate, applies tariffs to friend and foe alike, is not a win for the American people.
One argument he's been making lately is that maybe children will have to make do with fewer toys, fewer dolls. The quote that he had yesterday was, "I'm just saying that they don't need to have 30 dolls, they can have 3. They don't need to have 250 pencils, they can have 5. Do you think the American people buy that argument?
I have 2 grown daughters. I have 3 small granddaughters. And look, keeping dolls affordable, keeping our kids' toys affordable, that really is part of the American dream. I remember recently the Secretary of the Treasury said that cheap goods was not a part of the American dream. Well, I'm somebody who spent almost my entire life in public service. We lived on our paycheck while we raised 3 kids and put 3 kids through college. Cheap goods are a big part of it. And I think we ought to be candid about that. What I will give the president credit for is conceding the fact that his tariff policies will raise the cost of goods for consumers, whether it be toys or pencils or other products. And I appreciate him being forthright about that. I just think the American people
but is he being
cherish
forthright
their
about
freedom
that?
cherish their freedom to purchase their goods at the lowest possible cost. And that's not to say that that at the end of the day, there are key industries that are important to have here, but I think the way we generate manufacturing jobs, I think the way we generate high-tech jobs, the way we generate the kind of jobs that will serve America's security and prosperity is by making the Trump-Pence tax cuts permanent, rolling back regulation, lowering the cost of energy across the board, and making America the most attractive place in the world to invest and create jobs.
Well, and obviously he came into office promising to lower prices. So if prices go up as a result of those policies, is that backtracking on a pretty big campaign promise?
Well, some prices have gone down, as the president has conceded, and prices will fluctuate. But I do have a concern that when the so-called 90-day pause comes off, that even the administration has conceded that there may be a price shock in the economy, and there may be shortages. Caitlin, there were reports over the weekend of maybe a 35% reduction in the number of imports headed our way across the Pacific, I think the American people are going to see the consequences of this. I think they'll demand a different approach, and I think that approach is free trade with free nations. Let's use the leverage, the threat of tariffs, to negotiate down trade barriers with free nations, even while we stand firm with China and others.
Like, comment, and follow us on X @PatriotMediaGRP.